Brandon Ingram is officially a member of the Toronto Raptors. The notorious BI3 is in town. Let's go to the film room. What exactly are the Raptors getting in Brandon Ingram? It comes in a few different areas of the floor. Obviously, most people know his mid-range craft. He is a mid-range savant at this point in his career. 9 seasons in, and in the last 5 seasons of his career, he has been in the 99th percentile in terms of mid-range frequency. It is both a gift and a curse because he is absolutely incredible at getting to these shots in a variety of ways. He loves to take them, and he absolutely loves to make them as well. He is a deadly guy at isolating in these situations and hitting incredibly tough shots like he just did there. Ultimately, the question with him, and I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to, is how he fits in with this Raptors scheme. Obviously, they're very quick. They like to make quick decisions, and BI is a guy who sort of likes to move and you know, kind of keep the ball a little bit, hold it to create an opportunity for himself. That's why he's such a great isolation scorer, because he can be able to kind of create openings and advantages, create separation in these mid-range shots and mid-range opportunities. And so he's a great isolation scorer. That aspect of it is true. And maybe great is too high of a word. He's a good isolation scorer, but he's also a good pick and roll playmaker and a pick and roll creator for the Pelicans. He's been that for a while. Every season he's been healthy for New Orleans, he's had over 350 pick and roll ball handler possessions. And it comes in a variety of ways. One of the things that I think the Raptors can lean on is the fact that he can play next to Jakob Poeltl. And he actually said it in his media press conference, his media availability earlier today. But he mentioned that, like, hey, Jakob is actually one of my favorite guys on this team. And I think the reason is because Jakob is an incredible screen setter. And so when you have a guy who can lay out guys on offense like Jakob does, it creates openings for Ingram to get into that mid-range bag much easier, or hunt out a mismatch, hunt out a smaller player, and really go at them. Not only hunting out a smaller player, but also going at bigs so he can burst to the basket, finishing it around the rim. And I think that's the other aspect of this. Ingram is a really good driver. He doesn't get to the rim as often, like he doesn't take shots at the rim as much. And I think part of that is because he loves this mid-range area. Like, he's so good in this area that he doesn't necessarily take as many layups. I'm curious to see if that ends up changing as the Raptors progress, and how he can evolve more outside of what you're seeing in these highlights as a mid-range savant. Like, yes, this is a given area of what Ingram can do. The shot creation, the playmaking on this kind of, like, the other aspect is, like, his scoring is so good in this area that it actually opens up his playmaking in it as well. So you see this dribble handoff, he kind of comes over, and in this moment, in that mid-range area, he can create shots for others and score if he wants to. So the mid-range scoring, it really opens up the rest of his game, right? That's the bread and butter of what Brandon Ingram brings to this Raptors team. He's a great scorer in that area. And you can say, look, man, like, Scottie likes to operate in that area as well. Jakob Poeltl likes to operate in that area as well, as like a high post playmaker. But I actually think it's okay. I think that's what makes this fit really intriguing, because now you have a third weapon to put in areas of the floor where you like to run your offense. The Raptors love to run dribble handoffs off in the high post area with Scottie and with Jakob. They love to run these, like, delay actions with any of those guys. They love Scottie in that mid-post area where Ingram likes to operate too. And I think, like, there's a world in which both of those things can work. The reason I think that is because, like, ultimately, Ingram is so deadly in those areas as a scorer that it opens up his passing. It opens up his playmaking. And when you have a great screen setter like Jakob Poeltl, you know, the pick and roll playmaking will pop a lot, in my opinion, next to him. And how that works with Scottie is, I think it'll allow Scottie to get some easy opportunities more often offensively. We've seen Scottie here over the last little bit. His field goal percentage has gone down. He had a strugglesome game tonight against OKC. His field goal percentage has gone down because the difficulty of shots that he's taking as a guy, you know, in that mid-range area, like, he's just not there yet. And Ingram is there. Ingram is like that's the one area of his game where he is incredible at. And so I actually think Scottie can work off of the ball more and be able to feast offensively a little bit more. It'll allow him to lean into the defensive side of the ball, focus on being a defensive menace, really dominate in that area. And so you think of how this tandem can work together. That doesn't necessarily mean that Scottie's going to be moving off of the ball completely. I actually think Ingram, there's a world in which Ingram can work in similar sets that RJ Barrett has had over the last year where, the Raptors will have RJ curling to the basket, grab it in motion, and kind of attack. And a lot of those highlights that you just saw were Ingram doing that, right? He catches, in motion, goes, attacks. He's really quick with that process, like the process of like, I'm going to put pressure on the defense. And he does it with his mid-range shot, admittedly. He likes to get to that spot. But I think doing that will also enhance the Raptors offense. And that's a way that Ingram can work off of the ball as he is on ball. And the shooting is there, man. He's taking over 6 attempts this season. He's had 3 seasons before that where he's taken over 6 attempts. It was his all-star season in the year after that. And he shot 38 and 39%. So, like, he can take threes. He can make threes. It's just a process of getting him in spots where he can. And if he can have a ball handler and a passer to the degree at which Scottie is a ball handler and passer, not necessarily ball handler, but passer, you can envision a world in which Scottie is in that mid-post area, double comes, swing. Ingram can either attack or he can shoot that shot. And then you can envision vice versa. You can envision Ingram in that mid-post to high-post area creating, and the scoring gravity that he has creates opportunities for Emmanuel quickly, creates opportunities for Scottie Barnes in the dunker spot. So let's look at some of the playmaking stuff that BI can bring to this Raptors team too. You see how, boom, he gets the mismatch here, and then the pass to the dunker spot to Larry Nance. Think of Scottie being in that position. Again, in isolation against Jordan Nwora, incredible highlight, but then he's able to get to the rim. That's that aggression that you want to see at getting to the hoop and getting to the basket. And his presence just creates a lot of openings. 4 cutters, see how he creates an opportunity for Zion Williams. Here, attacking the basket. Watch how many eyes are on him in that mid-range area. Just finds the cutting Herb Jones. Empty side pick and roll here. Good job of navigating it. And then is able to just settle over a mid-range shot over Kawhi Leonard. That's incredible stuff from BI. Again, see how he catches it in motion here. Isolation here. Is able to get to his bucket and drive to the basket. That is incredible stuff from BI. Looking forward to that. Again, catching it in motion. So he catches, goes, immediately attacks, and then zips a pass to the weak side for Herb Jones to make the 3. Here he can be used as a screener, pop out, flash out. Defense is in rotation. He attacks, finds the man in the dunker spot. Easy stuff. And so this is the type of stuff where I think he can really work well next to Scottie Barnes, next to Emmanuel quickly. Think of those actions that you just saw, but with the Raptors players instead of it. And that's why his playmaking could really pop here in Toronto. We've already seen RJ Barrett's playmaking, his assist numbers go through the roof. We've seen Emmanuel Quickly's assist numbers go up. We've seen Scottie Barnes and Jakob Poeltl have career highs in assists this season and, career years in assists. I think this could be a really great opportunity for BI to just be cranking out assists because he can be a guy who can make plays because of his scoring gravity. And he's a 5 or 6 assist guy pretty much every single night. I think he could probably get up to 8 or 9 in the Raptors system because it's about making quick decisions. And the Raptors have shooters, they have play finishers, and it works really well with what BI provides as a scorer and as a playmaker. So you see him here, I really do think BI has a willingness to make plays and find his teammates. Here he zips a cross-court pass to Trey Murphy. He just has a willingness to make the right play on the floor. And I understand that he is more of an isolation guy, and here he attacks the basket and drives to the basket. Actually, fun little note here about BI attacking the basket. He's 8th league-wide this season in drive efficiency. He finishes on 53% of his drives. He's in the top 25 in drives per game. He drives, I believe, 12 times a game. So that's a decent part of his game as well. Yeah, he's not necessarily finishing at the basket as frequently, but ultimately it's a pretty good part of his game when he gets to it. And so look, I initially when there were rumors of Brandon Ingram potentially getting traded to the Toronto Raptors, I wasn't necessarily as high on the move. You guys heard me on the live show talking about how I had questions generally. And ultimately, I think most of my questions came down to value and what the contract will eventually look like. And I still do have contract questions with what the summer looks like for BI because ultimately, like this is a guy who hasn't played more than 64 games in his last 8 years of his career. I think his rookie season was 71, but before since then he's not been able to play and stay as healthy as you'd want. And so I generally like I had questions going into this, and especially since the Raptors gave up a first round pick and a second round pick. But overall, as I've like dug into the numbers and I've started to look at what BI could look like on the basketball court for the Raptors, this is how I feel about it. Basically, from a value perspective, the Raptors didn't give up too much because to get a player the quality of Brandon Ingram, at 27 years old in his prime, that's just not a player that's coming to the Toronto Raptors in free agency. Sorry to tell you guys, but like that's just not a player that the Toronto Raptors would attract in free agency at really any point in time. And if he was, he would probably be their best free agency signing ever, right? If you go back through history, I know Samson and Trey talked about this a while ago, but like, Fred was a great free agency signing. Jose Calderon was a good free agency signing, but those guys in terms of like talent level don't compare to Brandon Ingram. And so BI would be their best free agency signing if this was a free agency thing. And so guys don't necessarily come here. So from a value play, acquiring his bird rights is huge. So I've kind of come down on the fact that, like, look, Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk were not part of the long-term vision of this team. That Indiana first is likely going to be between, 16, 17 to like 25 at the best. Like the Pacers could have a really good season next year, or they could be middling and like in the playoffs, but they're still probably going to be a playoff team. So that's not going to be a lottery pick. And the 2031, second round pick, who cares? The earth may not exist by then. So value-wise, I thought it was completely fine. Thought it was a good deal. I will wait to see what the contract is, but generally, I don't think the Raptors are going to be offering BI the max, given some of the concerns that I just mentioned, and given the fact that like they haven't seen him on the court with their core. But I do think we will get an extension here before the end of the season, because the way Bobby Webster was talking and before the way BI was talking is that it seems like both sides are kind of having the discussions already. And I'd imagine, honestly, over the next couple of weeks, we might even get an extension, because this is the same way they talked about Kelly Olynyk also. And Olynyk got his extension, within probably 2 or 3 weeks. Now, admittedly, Olynyk is not the same caliber of player BI is, and also Olynyk was a hometown kid, so having those conversations is probably a lot easier than BI. That being said, so from a value perspective, being able to re-sign a guy who's 27 years old, entering his prime, I just talked about the shot creation, the playmaking ability, the sheer mid-range scoring, the closer type of stuff that he can bring to this Toronto Raptors team. Bringing in a talent like that for what they did is good work. And it's a risk worth taking in terms of the injuries and whatnot. I know Bobby Webster has talked about like the medical staff and how much they trust the Raptors staff to do that. So from that perspective, I am now warming up to the Raptors trading for Brandon Ingram. Warming up is probably too like, I don't know. I like the deal now. I like the fact that BI is on this team. It's not even warming up. I'm warmed up to the idea of BI being on this Toronto Raptors team. And if you look forward to the basketball on-court fit, if you guys have been watching this show and the recap for long enough, you'll know that like my thing and what I really enjoy to do is break down plays and really try to dissect like, okay, why is this specific thing happening on the court and how can we evolve past it? Because look, it's a rebuild. There's going to be tons of moments where there's failures and there's progressions and there's development and all that type of stuff. My goal, to the point where the Raptors end up on their next championship team, I want to track the development of that. And entering and incorporating BI is going to be such an interesting part. We will talk about this trade and how BI fits into it for a very long time. I know the Raptors right now are saying, well, this is just part one or an addition to their core, but incorporating BI in will be very, very interesting because I think we've seen the offense of the Raptors struggle. And part of that is because Scottie is working through the quirks of being a number one option. And truthfully has like struggled to figure out like his go-to shot. Yes, that mid-range shot when it's working and when he has it going is really really fun to watch, but like he still needs to work on his stuff as a driver and creator. Quickly has leaps and bounds to go as a creator himself, and is sort of lacking in the aggression department right now. And I wonder if that's more of an injury thing or trying to fit in thing. I'm not sure necessarily. We can probably do a recap on that in a bit. But throwing in Ingram in there, and I haven't even talked about the RJ aspect of this, but throwing in Ingram in there as like a guy who can just stir the drink a little bit for this Raptors team offensively should make them really, really good. I'm not sure if he plays this season. We'll see what happens. Obviously, I think the Raptors would like to get a few games of seeing Brandon Ingram with the squad and how they work together, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm kind of curious to see how this team looks post All-Star break. I'd be surprised if BI plays before the All-Star break. And so we'll probably get a reassessment here in the next couple of weeks and get an update on what the plan is for Brandon Ingram coming off of that ankle injury. But in terms of like pure value, it was worth the risk of acquiring a player who you have to extend to a contract. I think there's confidence in the fact that the Raptors are going to extend Brandon Ingram to a contract. So two of those questions have been alleviated for me. The value aspect and the contract aspect, I think, have alleviated. The concern has been alleviated for me. And then now comes the basketball on-court fit. And as I kind of go through the numbers, as I sift through the film, I really do see this working. And I think there are 2 or 3 areas that I have questions about. One of them is the defensive side of the ball because BI, his length is actually pretty useful on ball, and he's shown a propensity to lock in on ball more often than off ball. And so low steal percentage, low block percentage, not the best off ball defender, kind of falls asleep in certain moments off the ball. And I wonder if the Raptors can harness that a little bit more because I think his length, he's a 6'9" guy who has a 7'2" wingspan, and that could be harnessed in a major way. So I think defensively, that's one question I have moving forward on court. And the second thing is like, how well can he work off of the ball? I just talked about the catch and go stuff. I think that's one aspect that works well. I think the 3-point shooting will look better in Toronto just because there are more playmakers. And the other aspect is like cutting, moving without the ball. He's been excellent. Like you go through the numbers. It's like 1.5 points per 100 possessions as a cutter, but also he doesn't cut ever. Like less than 30 possessions every single year as a cutter. So he doesn't move a ton off of the ball. He is a guy who catches the ball and moves in motion. So when the action is for him, as I kind of showed in those highlights, when it's setting up for a DHO for him, or when it's setting up for a pick and roll for him, or if he's coming off of pin downs and kind of grabbing the ball, all of those things, yes, he's great at moving. But off of the ball, not the greatest mover. And so I wonder how that looks in Darko Rajakovic's system where you got to kind of cut constantly. You see guys like Grady Dick and Ochai Agbaji and all those type of guys work well in those systems. Very curious to see how that looks. I think it requires a level of buy-in, but it's just a question that I have. And I don't question BI's buy-in by any means. I think he's trying to be the best player possible. It's just like, how does that work in this system? So those are a couple questions I have moving forward. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this looks like. I think it's an exciting time. And if you're still on the fence about this trade, and if you're still kind of questioning it, I'll just kind of go through something that I thought of recently that made it make sense to me. Obviously, the Raptors aren't a free agency destination, so they have to incorporate talent through trade or through draft. And that's been their MO, not even like over the last 4 or 5 years. You know, people talked about them buying at the deadline over the last 4 or 5 years with Jakob Poeltl and Thad Young and RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley and Ochai Agbaji and Kelly Olynyk, and now with Brandon Ingram. It's actually way before that too. They traded for Kyle Lowry, right? They traded for Rudy Gay. That didn't work out. They flipped Rudy Gay for Grievous Vasquez, Patrick Patterson, and Chuck Hayes. Those guys together, along with DeMar DeRozan, who they drafted, obviously, helped grow this era, right, of great Raptors basketball. They flipped Terrence Ross and bought low on Serge Ibaka. Serge Ibaka comes in, has a weary season. If you've been a Raptors fan for a while, you remember like at first people were like, "Man, Serge does not look good," and then they figured it out with Serge, and he looked better, right? So Serge comes in, they buy low, great job, cool, W, right? They obviously flipped Jonas Valanciunas for Marc Gasol and DeLon Wright and all that type of stuff. The famous version of this is trading DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl for Kawhi Leonard, but they've always been a team that is trying to add players via trade. They are trying to buy low on players via trade and trying to squeeze as much juice possible out of the players that they acquire because they need talent through the door. And while they can do that through the draft, DeMar, Jonas Valanciunas, Terrence Ross, Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, it's an incredibly important part of what they do, the draft. And Bobby Webster today said, like, we are going to prioritize this 2025 draft because we know how important it is. But the other aspect of that, the part two to this, is the trades. And so if you look through their history as a front office, Kyle, Rudy Gay, obviously Kyle was Brian Colangelo, but still, Rudy Gay trade, Terrence Ross, Marc Gasol, JV, Kawhi. These are names that they all either traded for or traded to get another guy. So they've always operated like this. And I think the process, when you start to consider that, makes a lot of sense why they have Brandon Ingram, and it should make you excited to watch Brandon Ingram play some basketball for the Toronto Raptors. Pretty good talent to have moving forward with this team. And if you add a lottery pick, if you add a top 5 pick to this team, they're cooking with some gas. They are cooking with some gas. Folks, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the Raptors Republic YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys as always. We will have more in-depth Brandon Ingram coverage. I didn't want to talk about the game in this one because the OKC game, because truthfully, I think most people want to talk about BI right now, and so I understand that that's the need. But yes, subscribe. We'll have more BI content coming, and I'll see you guys later.